Hello everyone and welcome to the Music Professor channel. I'm Matthew King. I'm here today with Loki, who's helping me present the discussion in a kind of mute, but he's wandered off. Come back, friend. I'm also here with Ian Coulter, my brilliant editor, and he's filming the episodes. Please like and subscribe if you like the channel, and if you really like the channel, please consider becoming a patron, and the details are below the Patreon link. So a couple of weeks ago we did a discussion about Glenn Gould and Mozart, and that was a very specific thing. But today it's about AI, a really current obsession of our sort of cultural where we are historically. You know, everyone's obsessed with AI, and AI and music is a big topic. And fascinatingly, Gould did say in his discussion about Mozart, typically of him actually, he sort of prefigures some of today's issues around artificial intelligence and the possibility of computers composing. So let's just dive in straight away and see what he says. It's rather interesting.
And as Mozart grew older and abused this facility for improvising, his best ideas were necessarily aborted by those cliches. Because in fact a computer could produce them really with a minimum of programming, and so could a 5-year-old after a few weeks of theory lessons. So one begins to wonder whether, in circumstances like that, the composer is in fact really necessary.
So fascinatingly polemical. I mean, he's really throwing out a number of astonishingly argumentative points there. So the first thing he's talking about is something that we talked about a lot in the previous video, which is Mozart's reliance on cliché, and I'm not going to revisit that. Watch the last video, that's all about that topic. But now he's saying these things would be easy to replicate using a computer program. Wouldn't even be difficult to program, he's saying. Well, of course, that's not really true, because there certainly was no technology of his period that could do that. But now there is. We now have programs that can generate musical material, and I'm going to go into something that we've generated since watching that video. Ian's generated something using a program called UDO. It's even given a title to its musical result, which was, it's called itself Whispers of Elegance, which is quite fun. And Ian, what did you ask it to do?
I asked it to, I think you can't actually say the name of composers, it won't let you, but I said solo piano, classical music, classical style, stuff like that.
Okay, so you're not allowed to say write a piece in the style of Mozart, you have to say solo piano, classical style, and off it goes. Yeah. Okay. So I haven't heard the results of Ian's work with UDO yet, but I'm going to now fire it up. Okay, it's a little abrupt at the end. So, Ian, the abruptness, could you ask it to generate more material?
Yeah, you can. You can basically say, I want more that comes just after it ends, or you can ask for it to be like an intro to what was already generated so it can come before. So you can end up producing an entire piece of music.
Okay, so I'm going to listen to the extra bit, because when Ian asked it to generate more, it apparently came up with this. So let's have a listen to this bit. Kind of like listening to a bunch of non-sequiturs in that it throws together kind of vestiges of classical style, I suppose, but they don't actually make any sense in terms of the harmonic syntax. It's really odd. It's like somebody who's learned figures of speech but doesn't understand how sentence structure works, and so they just give you lots of bits of speech but they don't cohere into an intelligible line of text. Isn't it odd? Okay, well look, let's go back to the bit that we started with, because I think that was almost more comprehensible than what it did subsequently. And I'll try, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transcribe it, and then we'll have the notes for you to have a look on the screen.
A few moments later.
Okay, so Loki and I are back. I've just spent the last 10 minutes doing that transcription. It's not the most fun I've ever had because the material is quite weird, and I don't mind weird stuff, but this is, I don't know how to describe it. So it gets in your brain, partly because the computer seems to be using the same sequence of notes in different orders. It's very strange. A real composer would vary the register, Mozart, of all composers actually, would vary the register, so bits are high, bits are low and so on, whereas this tends to be in the same, everything's in the same octave. Right, let's have a look at it. So weirdly, the program seems to have decided at the beginning that it was appropriate in the style to simply have a I don't know if that's like a sort of introductory flourish. It doesn't even do that, which of course wouldn't be very classical anyway. It isn't really in the nature of the classical style to have introductory gestures. But anyway, I don't know why it's done that. Let's go into the bit that I've notated from the third bar. It's done this. God, that's rubbish, isn't it? Yeah, I'm actually putting in notes to try and make sense of that passage. But bar 5 is so weird. And then it does that. It's like it knows that it's got a 3-part texture. You get this a lot in Mozart. You know, he'll have a... He likes these melodies where everything is above middle C, and that where there are 3 voices instead of, say, 4 voices, because it gives you a bit more clarity than the 4-voice texture. And that seems to be what the computer's imitating. Melody accompanied in thirds. But isn't that weird? That the movement of the voices is so strange and ugly, actually. Bad counterpoint. That's horrible, where you've got, if anyone's doing A-level harmony, you don't want to have a drop like that, like the alto voice is doing, an unnecessary drop from the A to the C sharp, so it creates a sort of an ugly movement. Also the rhythm of the triplet with the grace note sounds very strange. So I don't think any classical composer would do that. It's like a weird thing where it just sounds like a robot's done it, even though it's, in a curious way, stylish in that broad sense of texture. And even the fact that the phrases come to an end on the dominant with the octave drop, that does make sense. But there's something that... it's just awkward and... Answering phrase, so it's obviously been programmed, and I'm right, Ian, in saying that they won't tell us how it's been programmed.
No, it's a mystery, it's a secret.
Right, it's a sort of trade secret. What they do seem to have told it, whoever programmed it's probably been reading Schoenberg, is that the periodic structure of a classical phrase, let me give you an example. In Mozart, it's really interesting, it comes from a little F major rondo of Mozart's, but he's got 3-bar phrases. It's the first bar, second bar, third bar. And then a little sort of answer, also 3 bars, going to the dominant, so it ends on a half close. But because of the 3-bar phrasing, it's sort of fascinating. And then the answer, same first 3 bars, and then the answer phrase also in 3 bars, but this time coming to a full close in the tonic. So clearly it's sort of formulae. Mozart liked formulae, and he liked disrupting formulae, because that's kind of what composing is in a way. It's about certain set conventions and then doing things differently. So there are set conventions where you go from 1 to 5, and then the second time you repeat the first half, but then you do something different and you end on the tonic. What's disrupting the convention is the 3-bar phrasing. Okay, so in the computer's version, let's put Mozart to one side for a minute. It does, weirdly, it starts off key, because it's in D major, but it starts on chord 2 in effect, in E minor. and then turns to tonic. Actually, I can't think of many classical pieces that do that. Perhaps Berlioz does it sometimes, but it's not something Mozart does much. You, my audience, are so clever. Can you think of any Mozart piece that begins on the supertonic like that? I don't think it happens. Might happen with Haydn. Tell me what you think. Tonic. That sort of clumsy half close, repeat of the first phrase. All right, so there's your repetition of the opening, but this time going to a modulation. So the computer's figured out how to modulate into A, the dominant, just as a way of turning in that direction. That's quite a classical thing to do. What isn't very nice, if I can be critical of the program, is that everything is over the same notes. You never break that. It never breaks out of the compass of the same set of notes, so it feels a bit trapped. But still, okay. A slightly odd little chromatic turn, but that's okay. Composers do odd things sometimes. We go into a slightly busier texture now with the left hand. I didn't really know how to notate this because it seemed to sustain the first notes of the left hand, but anyway, that's what I did. Oh no, this is unplayable. It's playable by the robot, but not by me. So you get this very odd sort of B minor 7. Oh God. That's unplayable. And horrible. It's a mixture of unplayable and horrible. Oh, root position, what the hell? Yeah, there we go. I mean, I'm not going to try playing that again. But a deeply ugly phrase in four-part harmony with a very strange direction. I mean, what should it do? This is okay. So if it went to B minor, then to chord 2, then you'd normally have a half close like that with a second inversion. That'd be very standard practice in the classical era. You wouldn't normally have a root position chord like that. A horrible clash between the parts there. Return to the tonic, which sounds absolutely dire because we've got consecutive fifths going on. Horrible inner voicing again, just like we had in bar 6, where it went, and bizarrely it's repeated that gesture here. Horrible. And then the next phrase, and it's like it doesn't seem able to pick up on. A real composer knows what to pick up on, what to repeat and what to renew. Schoenberg once said, and Schoenberg was a genius, he said composition is essentially repetition and variation. So you repeat things and you vary things and you make progress from variation. Well, there isn't much variation here. There's pure repetition sometimes, but it keeps moving on to a new thing. So here's another new thing with these sort of slightly obvious, you have these slightly clumsy syncopations, and then odd, isn't it? It's sort of an attempt at variation, I suppose, with that funny little scale. It's odd rhythmically though, with a triplet at the front. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that chromatic bit. Just strange, isn't it? I mean, the funny thing is, as I was saying to Ian at the beginning, late Beethoven does odd things, but this seems odd in a sort of profoundly unmusical way. I mustn't be mean. There are aspects of this that are sort of impressive in that it sort of captured elements of the style. And if you play it nicely, right, well, look, I can't deny that there's something intriguing and maybe even sophisticated in the way that it's appropriated aspects of style But the weird thing is, it's kind of without meaning, which comes back to my initial point, that when AI composes music, it understands about formulae, but what it doesn't seem to understand yet, and I'm kind of glad it doesn't really understand what it means to be a human being and to communicate. And music is fundamentally about communication. There's something very close to speech about music. This is something I said in the Glenn Gould video, in fact, which is that when Mozart writes a phrase, it's like speech. Just to show you what I mean, here's a different rondo, similar in style to the one I played a minute ago. You can hear when he writes that there's something like a person saying, do you know what I think? Or maybe it's, do you know what happened to me the other day? And there's a sort of storytelling quality. The way the melody goes up and then drops the seventh, and that's something artificial intelligence can't do. It can't inflect like the human voice. It can't tell a story because it doesn't really know what a story is. Mozart knows all about stories. He's written these amazing operas, so he understands stories, he understands narrative. And stories are part of the human condition, and music is part of the storytelling of humanity. And this is why I think AI will never, or certainly not for a very long time, be able to get anywhere near this stuff, the sort of real meaning behind music. It can give you the sort of symbols, but the signifier is disconnected from the reality that it's meant to symbolize, if you see what I mean. Just going on with Mozart, because aspects of this are like what the computer did. Opening phrase with this delightful drop, little half close, with a melody accompanied by two voices, so that's similar. Repeat of the opening, and then the full close. Alberti bass comes in, but it's wonderfully communicative, as if it's talking to you. And then these wonderful triplets at the end just to round it off, and then he moves into a secondary theme. Well, look, this has been a very quick discussion about AI technology, but I think we've revealed perhaps something about it. And one of the problems is, I'm glad to say, it doesn't know what it means to be a human being. And I think the essence of great art, to some degree, is its humanity. The other thing, of course, is architecture. When Ian asked it to compose more, it just sort of generated more stuff, like it was just generating plasticine or something. It just kind of splurges out more classical style. What it can't do is move on to the next thing. So, for example, with Mozart, we got to the end there, and then he goes on to a second idea, which is different, has a different kind of rhythm, and then it gets more animated, more chromatic, and so on. So Mozart takes you on a journey. Every piece of music, in fact, is a sort of, it's almost like stepping into a vehicle that's going to transport you somewhere, and that's the essence of music. I don't get that feeling at all listening to the AI version of a composition. Just to come back to one other thing that Gould said in the introductory statement.
In fact, a computer could produce them, really, with a minimum of programming. And so could a 5-year-old after a few weeks of theory lessons.
So there's this whole topic about the 5-year-old child being taught theory. Well, weirdly, it's such an odd thing for Gould to say, because if there are these 5-year-old children being taught theory that Gould says is very straightforward, let them come forth and display their talent. I don't deny that children can learn these things. Of course they can. In the classical era, a lot of kids were being trained in partimento technique and were able to improvise, let's say by the age of 10, on the tropes of style. So he's kind of right. Mozart himself, of course, is the most famous example. He is the example par excellence of a child being unleashed in this way. And we know what he did too. He wrote pieces like this when he was 5 or 6, the Minuet in F. With a little interrupted cadence. Now, that's a charming little 5-year-old piece, very much a piece by a 5-year-old, not to be confused with the wonderful and sophisticated kind of music that Mozart was writing when he was in his 30s. It's very much the work of a small child. Magnificent, brilliant child, working within, exactly as Gould's described, within the sort of stylistic tropes of the period. The style galant of the 1760s when it was composed. That's about all I have to say about children. Yes, of course it's true that children with theoretical knowledge can make use of the tropes of style in a childish way. So it's a weird point. Gould's wrong. I mean, I love Glenn Gould, and I think that what he says is absolutely essential on a certain level, which is that we don't have to admire composers just because they're famous or they're celebrities. That's tedious. Admiring people because they're celebrities is boring. We admire people because they are amazing and we admire their work. And that's why we should be listening to Mozart, interrogating him, discovering whether the music is any good. And not just Mozart, loads of other composers who are wonderful. So here endeth the lesson. I think we've discussed AI probably in sufficient depth for now. Let me know what you think. What did you think of what the computer program generated? Did it satisfy your preferences? Did you think it was better than Mozart? Was Gould right? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.